Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Bruce Mackie's just arrived and a very special guest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great to be here.
No, thank you for coming in. You're an economist,
Yeah.
former banker,
Yes.
former bookseller,
Yes.
now professional golfer.
No, not professional golfer, amateur golfer, still amateur golfer, amateur sailor.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'd like to bring you in on this subject.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that, of course, for all of these lotteries, the law prescribes absolutely what percentage of the money must go to the charity involved.
But then why don't they tell us that on the screen?
Well, I guess they don't feel they need to every time, but it certainly is written in law that they have to provide X amount of the money must go to the prizes must be not more than X percent and not less than X percent of the amount that's collected. So that's governed very strictly by law. There's no way the charities can be ripping it off. And they are checked. Believe me, they are checked. I'm a member of. I'm now on the executive committee of a very small charity called the Ileostomy Association of South Australia.
Yes.
We distribute supplies for people with stomas.
Yes.
And we have to report to the Australian Charities and Commission every year. Our accounts have to go in and they're checked. And if there's any significant change from the previous year, they're queried. I mean, and these big charities, they are governed very, very carefully.
But what about overheads, administration, which can cover an awful lot of things?
Oh, yes, it can. Yeah, but there's a different question between how much of the lottery money goes to the charities and how much of the charities' money then goes out to the people that it's supposed to benefit and how much of it goes into admin.
Yeah, but aren't they kind of linked? Because after all, by the time they pay all the overheads, how much to go to the actual cause could be limited by the size of the overheads.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so for a big lottery, obviously there's a fair bit of advertising cost in that. But the prize is still, the amount of prize is set by the law. There's no avoiding that. They have to pay a certain amount as the prize.
Does that make you feel better, Maria?
No, it doesn't, because I would like full transparency, X amount collected, X amount for administration, and the piddly little bit that actually goes to where it should go to. We can actually have these laws, but they could not check every single $110,000 charity papers. They couldn't check it in a 12-month period. Oh. We should legislate, as I say, full transparency, and if they only give $1,000 at the end of it, it's a scam, in my book.
If you go to the charities, if you go to the website of the Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, you can look at the accounts of any of them.
Well, they have 110,000 charity documentation that I could actually...
Yes. Because I have to, for the charity that I'm the public officer for, I have to upload those accounts myself within a month of the auditor signing the accounts. They have to be uploaded into the website of the Charities and Commission.
Yeah, well, that's something I didn't know. But here's one for you both to chew on. There is an ad I see very, very often, which is the RSPCA pet insurance commercial.
Yes.
Oh,
now, what it says there... And I listen very carefully because I don't think the RSPCA have an insurance company. I think somebody is using their name and I'm not saying there's anything illegal about it. But what it says at the end of the commercial is that part of your first year's premium will go to support the RSPCA.
Yep.
But I would have thought it would have been a very easy thing to say how big a part. How many dollars? I mean, $10, $5, $100?
Don't know.
I don't know either.
Probably somewhere in the fine print, it will say which insurance company is underwriting it. It will certainly say which insurance company is underwriting it when you get to do the paperwork.
You see the fine print.
You'll see the fine print. It'll be in there.
Yeah.
It would have to be.
All right, Maria, is anything else on your mind?
Yeah, cost of living.
Cost of living, all right.
Yeah.
That
Cost
affects
of living-
everybody.
Yes. Cost of living has gone up because we've got foreign raiders coming into Australia and buying us out and making a killing of profits for themselves. We should own our assets. We shouldn't have foreign raiders coming in and buying us out and making us poor. It's not the Ukrainian war. It's not the Middle East. It's not. It's just stupidity by our governments that on our money, they are like drunken politicians giving our money away, our hard-earned money, willy-nilly, without any question of need, just to make themselves look good.
Well, Maria, I don't know. I put on your economist hat. Wouldn't it be a sensible law to say that people cannot come in from another part of the world and buy property?
We wouldn't have our country if we didn't allow people to come in and invest in Australia.
But we can't say go to China and buy a house there, I don't think.
No, we can't. And you could go and buy property in China. Yes, they'd love to have you go and buy houses at the moment because they've got so many unoccupied houses that they're not using. But, Australia was built on foreign investment. There is no question about it that Australia was built on foreign investment. And if we still don't have enough money yet to fund all the investment that we need. So we still, from time to time, for big industries, we still need to bring in money. There's no question about it.
Well, what about a circumstance like, for example, Cubby Station, which I think is the biggest land holding in the entire country? The Chinese came in and bought that. And, I just don't know whether it's a wise thing to have a huge asset like that, or the port of Darwin, or the port of Newcastle in the hands of a foreign country. Why?
Yeah. Well, the Cubby Station one, the concern for me is not the buying of the land, it was the buying of the water. That in fact it's growing cotton, which Australia shouldn't grow because we don't have enough water to grow cotton.
I agree with that, absolutely.
Similarly, we probably shouldn't grow rice because we don't have enough water to grow rice.
No.
There are other places in the world that have plenty of water to do that. I know of we had a Brazilian exchange daughter, and one of her cousins owned something like 10,000 acres of rice in Argentina, or Brazil, the south of Brazil. Never has to do anything. The irrigation's there's always the water every year. There's never a concern about whether there's enough water or not. So that's the sort of place that should be growing cotton and rice, although that's not warm enough for cotton, but certainly good enough for rice. So, it wasn't that was the concern. It was, to me, the ownership of the station wasn't the wrong thing, because they're paying tax. We know they're registered. They have to abide by all our laws. So but the Cubby Station to me was the control of the water rather than the fact that it was in foreign ownership.
For as long as I've been in radio, it's been a talking point, foreign ownership of this and foreign ownership of that. Clearly it is not a popular thing among Australians.
No, it's not. It's not. But if Gina Reinhardt offers her all her land for sale, all her stations for sale, and there's nobody in it she wants out, and there's nobody in Australia prepared to buy it, well, and there are people with overseas money who are prepared to buy it and abide by Australian law in buying it, well, there's not really any option, is there?
Yeah.
And that happened. I mean, she put properties up for sale, and there wasn't an Australian buyer for them, despite the fact that they're very profitable cattle stations.
And people really do like the sort of thing that Twiggy Forrest gets up to. He goes and buys...
R.M. Williams.
He buys R.M. Williams back out of overseas hands, and he's now bought Kubra hats.
Yes.
So he wants that to stay in the country. The average Australian likes to hear those sort of stories.
Oh, absolutely. And Gina Reinhardt originally bought a lot of the stations out of foreign ownership for that reason. But then she said it's a risky business. I mean, cattle farming is always a risky business because of the droughts and the water and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And she said she wanted out, and no Australian super fund or anything was prepared to buy it. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's just we have to have the investment.
Was the voice referendum result a surprise to you? Or
not a surprise at all.
No, it wasn't to me either.
And somebody was talking to me about it the other day, and they said, why did you vote no? And I said, because... even assuming the voice was established and assuming that it worked to eliminate the gap, And we were never told how it was going to eliminate the gap.
Or how big the gap was.
Or how big the gap was. Well, we know how big the gap was. We have the report every year. But nobody could tell us how it was going to close the gap. But my main objection was that had it been created and had it succeeded in closing the gap, it would not have been needed, but it would still have been there in the Constitution forever and a day as a racist body.
Yes.
Because it was restricted to members of one race only. And I was not prepared to vote for a racist body, and particularly one that we hope, I genuinely, sincerely hope we can close the gap.
Yes.
And then it wouldn't be needed at all.
The trouble with this gap thing is that of the 3% of the population that is Aboriginal, we're only talking about that section of the 3% that is truly deprived and in great difficulty one way or another. It's alcohol or it's domestic violence. Yeah. It is also isolation, because if you find yourself in out the back of Whoop Whoop, you're not going to have the sort of services and advantages that you would have in the city. So we're talking probably about 1.2% of the Aboriginal population. Mm-hmm. Now, the money that they threw at that referendum would have gone a long way to looking after 1.2% of the population.
Would have built a lot of dongas out there.
It would have.
Yeah. And there's also the issue of in one of the outback communities where they have the Aboriginal lands. If you, for example, want to go across the Gun Barrel Highway, which I have done, to get there you have to go through Katajuta and Uluru, and to get there you have to get a permit. Now, we had applied at least 2 months in advance of our wanting to go to get the permit.
This is Australia. We're all Australians. We shouldn't need a permit to move around our own country.
It's the Aboriginal land, and it's been gifted to them, so they have the right under the law to say that you've got to have a permit to enter. It wasn't until the day before we left that Andy rang and said, look, we applied 2 months ago, and I faxed you again, and he gave the list of all the dates that he'd sent the faxes through. Said, we haven't had an answer, so we're going anyway. And I wanted it recorded and I wanted it acknowledged, and here's the fax that we've sent you, that we have applied, and these are the dates that we applied. We wanted to go anyway. So he got a fax within about 5 minutes to say, yes, it's okay, your permit's approved. But why, they can't build a tourist industry into there if they're going to make it so bloody hard to go.
No, well, the New South Wales government gave the local Aboriginals on the north coast of New South Wales a beautiful, well, it was a mountain. It's called Mount Warning. Now, Mount Warning was a tourist attraction, and photographers loved it, and bird watchers thought the world of it. And first thing they did was to say, well, no white people can go on Mount Warning again.
Yep.
Refused to exactly say what cultural or spiritual problem there was. No women, black women or white women, are allowed on Mount Warning. Now, this is a very strange way to run a country, and particularly when we have progressively organised for ownership of 55%.
Yeah, yeah. But it's funny, very similar things happened in New Zealand. There was in the mountainous area, to Tarawera, I think it is, there were a lot of bushwalking trails with cabins, overnight cabins and all the rest of it, and the ownership and control of it was handed to the Maori, and within about a month all the cabins had been demolished.
Good God.
Said, we don't want people walking through. So they'd forgone all the income that they were going to get from the hikers and all the rest of it, and just ripped the cabins out. Which wasn't in the plan at all, but that's what happened.
No, well, I think that's rather destructive and self-defeating.
So they just didn't want the people in there. For whatever reasons, they said, no, we're not going to have walkers through there. Whether it was sacred or whatever, nobody understood. They just disappeared.
Do you miss the bookshop?
Yes and no. I don't miss the work. And I don't miss having Mandy at the shop 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I miss the customers. It was the most book customers are lovely people.
Yeah,
and the vast majority were lovely people, and we enjoyed chatting with them and working with them. But no, retail is bloody hard work.
Yes, I know. When I was selling books...
the government is determined to make it a hell of a lot harder.
Well, it's not in their interest to do that, of course, but they
are. The current laws that they've got about casual work will make any employer extremely reluctant to take on Christmas casuals.
Yes. Now,
we used to. We would take on the year 11s and the year 12s, and we'd hire them and we'd use them occasionally during the year to train them up, so that because we used to do 25% of our year's business in 5 weeks. So over that period, we needed, for that 6 or 7 weeks leading up to Christmas, we needed extra staff. But under the new laws, for example, if you've got a casual who's rostered today and calls in sick, if you call up one of your other casuals to come in and replace him, that casual then can't do their next shift. And you have to give their roster 2 weeks in advance. So
can't they see that their rules are going to just defeat the whole purpose?
The rules are going to defeat the whole purpose. Well, of course, they're being driven by the unions, and the unions hate casual employment. They do not want any casuals at all. They want everybody to be full-time, permanent employed.
Well, that might be a goal for them, but a lot of people like casual work.
Absolutely, and the staff get paid 25% more.
Yep.
And we had a lot of staff that were working a lot of hours that we offered full-time or permanent part-time employment, and they said no. They were often, in a lot of cases, they were married women whose husband had a job, and this money was extra. And they just wanted the money. They weren't worried about holidays and all the rest of it.
No,
because
absolutely.
They were casuals. And we would arrange that they could take holidays. We had enough casuals on the list that if they wanted to take holidays, we could sort other casuals.
That's right.
But it's going to be increasingly difficult to do it because you're going to have the roster 2 weeks in advance.
I always liked the idea of working on contract, and I would say, well, look, I don't want holiday leave or holiday leave loading. I don't want sick leave. I don't want parental leave. I don't want maternal leave or whatever. This is why I'm asking for more money, because you don't have to pay all of these on costs.
But that is absolute anathema to the union movement.
Good.
And the Labor government is controlled by the union movement.
Well, it's owned by it. I know. The unions own the Labor government.
And that's what the same work, same pay thing is about. Which BHP have said that if that legislation goes through, they're going to cancel the development, the next stage of the Roxby Downs development. Yeah. Because the same... And somebody said to me, what's it all about? And I said, well, let's say that they bought Oz Minerals to open up the Carapatina mine. So BHP have got staff working at Roxby Downs who live in the Roxby Downs village. They've got the school, they've got the house, they've got everything else. They go to work at Carapatina or beyond. That's back to fly in, fly out. Living on site for the weekend or whatever, and they would be paid more. But under the law now, you can't pay them more because they're driving a similar machine, they're driving the same truck, but by the same employer, so they've got to be paid the same, even though their working conditions are entirely different.
Freedom of choice, I think, is a vital part of being Australian.
But don't ever say that to a Labor government. Don't ever say that to a Labor government.
Well, they don't talk to me, and quite frankly,
they don't believe in it. They
don't believe in personal freedom, No. But the other thing about employing people, it's ridiculous that there is such a thing as payroll tax. You have to pay a tax to give somebody a job? That's nuts.
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah.
And the idea of sort of, on costs being 25% of the salary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, that's payroll tax and holiday leave and superannuation and all those other things. Yeah, it's probably over 25% now.
Yeah. So why do we tolerate it? Why isn't there a political party out there who would come to the people with a whole new deal, a better deal?
Australians won't vote for that sort of change, Jeremy. Remember, it took John Howard 2 goes to get the GST through.
Yeah. I take it you agree with the GST.
Absolutely. And it should be extended and cover everything, and it should go up.
Yes. I've heard that this is being considered, 15% and on everything.
And on everything, but the politicians just won't touch it. I mean, it's the most sensible reform that Australia could put in, and then you increase your age pensions by a bit and you increase your charity payouts by a little bit, but it means it's a tax that absolutely is unavoidable.
Yeah, but it's a tax on consumption,
yes,
and it's not a tax on effort and enterprise and energy. These are things you don't want to tax. You want more of them, not less of them.
That's dead right. So it's the tax on consumption, and at the moment we've got too much demand and too much consumption, helping to push the inflation. And as the Governor of the Reserve Bank said very recently, she said that Sure, there have been outside shocks that have caused part of the inflation, but a significant part of it now is internally driven.
Homegrown.
It's homegrown. Well, if you think back to COVID, there was an announcement the other day. What was it? $64 billion that the government paid out in aid for COVID.
Yes.
Now, most of that money is still sitting in people's bank accounts.
Yeah.
And still around. And the house prices have gone up, so the owners of the houses feel more wealthy.
Yeah.
So they feel that they are more inclined to spend. And she commented that the services like hairdressers and so on, their prices are going up.
Yeah.
And I had someone say to me the other night, that it's absolutely dreadful to accuse them of pushing inflation. And I said, no, that's not what she said. What she said was they are able to rise because people are willing to pay the extra.
Yes.
The demand is there, the money is there, so people are willing to pay the hairdresser the extra $5.
Yes.
And they're willing to pay the extra $1 for the coffee and all the rest of it because the money's there, and the demand is there. And, you know, the government pumped money into, as they always do, whenever there's a downturn of any sort, they pump money into housing.
Yeah.
Well, hell, we're already short of tradies, and you put more money out there in the economy to try to build more houses, and there's no tradies to build them. My son's trying to build a house that's been well over 12 months, and it's still only half completed.
Well, they want to build, I think it is 1.2 million houses in the next 5 years. Yeah. And as you point out, where will the tradespeople come from? You can't even get a pergola put up.
We're going to bring them in as migrants, you see.
But are they going to be skilled? I don't know that we ask anybody as they come into the country.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be. I mean, technically they're supposed to be, and their visa is supposed to be, all of that. But
yeah.
whether they then go and whether their skills are then acceptable in Australia or not is a different story. Whether their language is good enough,
yes,
whatever. But the key problem at the moment is we're already short of infrastructure and we're already short of housing,
yes,
and we're bringing in each year more than the population of Tasmania.
500,000 migrants a year. I think it was 600 this year.
We're increasing our population by more than the state of Tasmania every year.
Yeah, and we don't know how to employ them and we don't know how to house them.
Well, at the moment we're employing them all right. I mean, the unemployment's way, way down. But we don't know how to house them.
No.
And that's pushing the house price and particularly the rental prices.
Yeah. Do you believe in capital gains tax?
Yes, I do in some cases. Not for everything, but certainly for unearned income on assets that you've bought as an investment. Absolutely. Yeah. So not on the family home which you're living in, not on your car that you're using every day,
right?
Not on your business that you're running and it's your source of income, but on the speculative property that you buy in the hope that prices are going to go up. Yes, you should be taxed on that.
All right. Well, let me ask you as an economist. We had the chief economist from the Commonwealth Bank on a little bit earlier, and I asked him, and he didn't think there was an answer to the question. The question is, inflation eats away at the value of the dollar in your pocket or the dollar in your bank account.
Yes.
Inflation eats away at that, and at the moment it's 4.9%. So at the end of the year, our assets, our value has gone down, our worth has gone down.
Believe me, Mandy and I know all about it because we're just living on superannuation. That's our sole income. So,
well, why can't we claim inflation as a tax deduction?
Oh, boy.
Is there a reason?
Oh. Well, I can just think of the mechanics of doing it as a start, because then it would mean everybody's having to fill in tax returns and say what all their assets are and all the rest of it. And then you've got the problem with valuing assets. Do you take the book value? Do you take the purchase value? At what date do you
It'll
take that?
It'll give them something to do.
We don't want more people employed in Canberra, Jeremy. There's already too bloody many.
Yes.
You're creating a bureaucracy, not getting rid of it. We want to get rid of them. We want to downsize it, which is one of the reasons that the goods and services tax, if you got rid of some other things, you get rid of other taxes and other things.
What about death duties?
Same thing.
Yeah.
On assets, speculative assets, yes. On your incoming assets, no.
But when you die, what's the point? They can tax you. They can tax you to death.
They could tax you to death.
You're already dead. Help yourself.
Your family would be pretty ticked off.
Well, it'd be one way of teaching them a lesson
So don't expect to live off mum and dad in the future. Yes.
No, the Bank of Mum and Dad.
The Bank
it's
of Mum and
very,
Dad,
very popular bank.
Yeah. That's why the people who are wise don't have many assets left at the end of it. And that's what my father-in-law always said. My will reads, it's a very simple will. I don't think it actually read this, but he always used to say, my will's a very simple will. It reads, being of sound mind, I have spent it all.
Spending the kids' inheritance.
Yes.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Ski holidays, yes.
Yeah, well, the kids couldn't really front mum and dad and say with any resentment, we don't want you to have a good time in your old age.
In fact, I used to argue with my father to say, for God's sake, Dad, do some travel, do some other things.
Yeah.
We don't need the money. You've given us the education. You started us off. You gave us the mortgage or the second mortgage on the first house. You gave us our first car, so you got us on our feet.
Yeah.
We don't need it now. You enjoy the rest of it. But no, he was of the very old school. He was of the Depression school.
Yeah. Well, that's this particular group of people who came through the Depression and the Second World War have carried this country on their backs, and they deserve. I'm just trying to find, if I can lay my hands on it quickly, I think she was a finance writer for the Age newspaper, and she came up with this thing the other week, which was that, there it is, Rachel Plum is her name. Rachel Plum, finance writer with the Age. And she says here, baby boomers should stop spending because you're driving up the interest rates and you're making it harder for us millennials to buy a house. So, when you get to a certain age, you should be able to enjoy yourself.
Yes, that's true. But we're in a situation of excess demand. Let's face it, there's excess demand in the community, and that's why people can push their prices up. Yeah. Because people are willing to pay the price, and the baby boomers are the ones who are spending the money. But they're certainly not building houses. They're not causing the housing inflation, but they're causing part of other elements of the problem.
Yeah.
And so the government has had to reduce the demand by pushing up interest rates. And people say, well, that's terribly unfair because it punishes those who are buying houses. It punishes the young. Yeah. And rewards those that are saved. And I said, yeah, that's one side of the equation, but the other side of the equation is on the business investment. That if the interest rates go up, any business that's looking at buying a new machine, if he's got to borrow money, if he's looking at opening a new business, building a new building, whatever else, he's looking at the finance cost versus the expected rate of return. If the finance cost goes too high, then the project gets cancelled and you reduce that business demand. So while the talked about bit of interest rates is always the housing mortgage, you can't overlook the business impact as well.
But they do tell me that only a third of us, I'm in there, a third of us has a mortgage. The other third would be renting, and the other third would be hoping the interest rates go up because they're self-funded retirees.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
So the focus is, of course, always on the interest rate that's affecting
the housing mortgage. The
housing mortgage.
The television, every time there's an interest rate rise, it's going to cost the person with a $300,000 mortgage X amount a month. They always do that. That's what they focus on all the time. They never focus on the fact that suddenly the retirees have got some more money. So, in fact, that will be boosting the economy. And they never talk about the possible impact on business.
Bruce Mackie is my guest, and he is capable of wearing all kinds of hats. All kinds of hats. Another question.
Yes.
When the interest rates were cut to try and get the economy off its knees, and it got down to 10% or a tenth of 1%.
Yeah, 0.1%.
Yeah, 0.1%.
Yes.
Now, poor old Phil Lowe did some jawboning and got into trouble and possibly even lost his job over saying, listen, you can go out there with confidence because,
it's not going to go up.
No, around 2024, something like that. Yeah. So he was doing his job. He couldn't take the interest rates down any further, so he had to find another way of doing it. Now,
but, of course, what he didn't predict was that the immigration was still going to go at this huge rate, that the demand was just going to go up and up and up. But the other side of it is, and don't ever overlook this, that at that 0.1%, they lent the bank something like $190 billion.
The government did?
The Reserve Bank did.
Oh, the Reserve Bank.
They lent the big banks vast amounts of money at 0.1%. Which the banks then lent on into housing mortgages and business loans and all the rest of it, all a part of keeping the economy rolling during COVID.
Velocity of money.
When we wanted there was a threat that COVID was going to shut the economy down. They wanted it to keep going, so they boosted it. So the housing business would go up and business would be encouraged to borrow to invest at this ridiculous rate. And, of course, the banks have made huge profits on it because that 0.1 is still out there. Most of it rolls over this year or next year. Yeah. So the bank's cost of funding is going to go up dramatically over the next 12 or 18 months when that 0.1 rolls off.
But, Bruce, you can't tell me that somebody would go into his bank or her bank and say, oh, the interest rates are very low, I'll borrow more than I can possibly afford to pay back. I mean, the bank would sort of say, now, these interest rates are at an emergency level. You've got to borrow this money, and we have to figure out whether you can afford to pay it back at the usual, normal interest rate of about 5%, 7%.
That's absolutely right for the first home buyer or the struggler on side street that's struggling to pay their mortgage or get into their first house.
Yeah.
But you forget the guy who already owns his home unencumbered, who goes in and says, listen, if I can borrow money at 2 or 3% from the bank because I've got the security of the house behind me, I can make more than that out of the stock market, and I'll borrow it and I'll put it into the stock market and I'll make money. I'll buy an investment house.
But isn't that good thinking?
It's good thinking on his point of view, but it's not necessarily good thinking if they start investing it in investment properties and pushing the price up, taking a house that would be an owner-occupier house, taking it off the market, putting it in the rental market at a higher rate. It may or may not be. But, you've got to consider all of these elements and all of these possibilities and weighing these up. It's never a simple one-off equation. You've got to start thinking about who's impacted, where they're impacted, how they're impacted. And I'm sure that there are businesses that borrowed money to invest in things that they wouldn't otherwise have done when they could get it so cheaply. Maybe they bought the new warehouse or they bought the new factory, because with the charity, the Ileostomy Association that I'm involved with, we looked at buying a new little warehouse about 12 months ago. Not seriously, because one, there's no little warehouses on the market anyway, and two, the very few that are there are too bloody expensive. So we carry on renting.
What do you think of property tax? If you have an investment property, you're providing a place for somebody to rent.
Well, they're already, if you're an income earner, you're already paying tax on the income some way or another. So if it's an investment property and you're earning income on it, then you're paying tax some way or another. And depending how much negative gearing you've got and all the rest of it, but that income on the investment property is taxable one way or another.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, self-made people, if you like, or independent people, would speak very highly of this wonderful thing, this enterprise in Australia where you can negatively gear and somebody can be in that home paying it off for you. I think it's a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing.
It's a win-win-win-win.
It is. And without negative gearing, there would be a hell of a lot less rental houses on the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've also got to consider on the other side, for a business, negative gearing's always been, if you own one shop and you decide to open a second shop doing the same thing, which we did, the first year is going to be a loss. You need to be able to offset that loss against because it's the same business.
Yes.
It's the same business in a different location. You've got to be able to offset the losses on that one against the profits you're making on this one.
Do you think they will ever attack the family home and come at the family home for property tax of one kind or another?
If they do, they'll lose government the next day.
Good. Good.
Yeah, they might in the form of the death tax, payroll tax, the death duty, but they would never come at a tax on the family home while you're living in it. They would just be gone.
Yes. Oh well, at least we've got.
It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any practical sense either.
A vestige of common sense.
Yeah.
Which is not something you see on the streets all that often.
No, it's become a very rare commodity. It's not common anymore.
What do you think? What do you think of the people with the Free Palestine slogans and flags? And there's an element here of anti-Semitism which I never thought I would ever see in Australia.
Jeremy, I read a very interesting article by Paul Friedman. Look him up if you can get through the firewalls on the New York Times. I subscribe so I can read them.
Yeah.
He said, if you look at the Palestine-Israel situation, you're looking at a kaleidoscope. There are so many colours and hues, and it's changing so often all the time that it is impossible to be absolutely clear about what's happening to whom. But the one thing that is clear is that the situation is being driven by religious hardliners on both sides. It's being driven by the Zionists, who want to expand the land of Israel and go back to what they think it used to be in aeons past, and the Islamic religious zealots who believe that Israel should not exist as a country.
Yeah.
Right? That's
irresistible force hitting the immovable object.
Immovable object. And Friedman, in his recent analysis, says, that Biden's trying to broker peace, but while Netanyahu and his current coalition are in the Israeli government, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And while the current people who rule Hamas, who incidentally none of them live in Gaza, they all live in Qatar.
Yeah, it's funny about that.
All the people, and they're all billionaires.
Yeah.
They're just using the Hamas foot soldiers because they want to see Israel not exist. And they're funded partly by Iran and their own money and all the rest of it. And it's just, it's got one group on one side who, for religious reasons, do not want to see Israel exist.
Yeah.
And you've got on the other side religious hardliners who want to expand Israel.
But it doesn't have much to do with Australia. I don't know why we sort of see on television those demonstrations which are ugly.
Oh, absolutely.
And dangerous.
Yeah.
And
but that's being driven by religion on both sides.
Yeah, but
it is being driven by religion on both sides.
I know, but on the very visible side, there are people, for some reason, weaponising our children. They are going into the schools with a whole lot of rhetoric about Israel and Zionism and Jews and all of this.
Yes.
And kids, I don't know. I mean, I would have thought children would have been a little more discriminating.
No, not
that,
if they're having it poured into them.
Poured into them.
Yeah.
But why?
And in particular, the Islamic children are getting it poured into them at home.
Oh, sure.
Hate the Jews, death to the Jews. I mean, even during the Palestinian, this current war, the Hamas was killing as many Arabs who live in Israel as it was killing Jews. Because they regard the Arabs who live in live comfortably in Israel as Jews. I say, if you live and support them, and it was a case, in one case, it was this guy had rescued a number of Jewish people from one of the raids or something, and Hamas came out publicly and said, you are Arabs that supported those Jews, you are going to die.
They tell me that 80% of the people in the Gaza Strip, 80% support Hamas.
Yeah, but if you don't support Hamas, Jeremy, you get your head, you get shot.
Killed. Yeah.
Well. There's no democracy or anything. In Hamas is an absolute dictatorship.
Yeah. Well, they're probably they're dangerous, but not as dangerous as Hezbollah or whatever they call themselves.
I wouldn't say they're not as dangerous. They're all equally dangerous.
Apparently, Hezbollah has got 150,000. Literally 150,000 missiles, all aimed at Israel.
Well, even after all of the bombing and everything else that Israel had done and everything else, Hamas was still able to fire rockets.
Yeah.
They're so embedded and so entrenched and they've got so much of it. And if you imagine the money they've spent on those rockets, if they'd spent on the welfare of their people, Gaza would be a hell of a lot better place. The Gazans would be a whole lot better off. And you might have sensible relations between the two countries that they could coexist. But no, Hamas is absolutely committed to the death of Israel, so that's where you go.
Well, it is a very volatile part of the world, but I just don't like to see elements of it on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne.
Absolutely, I agree. Couldn't agree more. But that's unfortunately what religious fanaticism tends to bring about.
Do you believe in climate change?
Yep.
Well, the climate is changing all the time.
Climate is changing all the time. I read that there is no doubt that CO2 is making it worse, but Australia's policies towards it are absolute insanity.
In large.
Absolutely. Taking 48 people to this conference to start with.
Yeah, well, there's 70,000 going.
I mean, it is just ridiculous. But, to think that us closing down 4 coal mines is going to change Australia's climate is I don't know what cloud cuckoo land these Greens and these people are living in.
I keep on thinking, what is the problem they're trying to fix? 1% of the global emissions Australia is responsible for. Yeah. If you turned off everything, every power station light, stopped every car, would absolutely make no difference.
No, I say, if we all turned into Van Winkle and went to sleep for 12 months...
Nothing, wouldn't change a thing.
No, the CO2 would have gone up because it's increasing more per year than Australia's output.
Yeah, well,
and that's, Pakistan is building coal-fired power stations. India's building more than 100 of them at the moment. China's building nearly 400.
Yeah.
The only solution, because the Chinese have every right to improve their standard of living. Yes. The Indians have every right to improve their standard of living. The Pakistanis have every right. Every person has the right to improve their standard of living. The only way to do it is energy.
Yes.
And unless we go nuclear, it is going to keep
I agree with you.
The CO2 pumping out.
I agree with you. But in China, for example, they are working very hard to lift their people, all the people, out of poverty, while our government is, with the cost of electricity, trying to get its people into poverty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't really.
It doesn't make any sense.
And they still get elected.
Yeah, it just does not make any sense at all. The Greens and the Teals just live in some sort of cloud cuckoo land that thinks that if they spent the money that they're spending on building the batteries and the wind farms and all the rest of it, if they spent that on R&D to try to find some other new alternative or to find a way of making nuclear power stations more safe, it would make a hell of a lot more sense.
But don't turn off the power that you have in anticipation of the one that you want.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all.
And people are only now starting to understand the costs to the regions of all of this stuff, the building of the wind farms, but the power lines that have to be built.
It's 10,000 kilometres of power lines, and
these are not just on your little light poles, and they can't be buried underground. These are the high tension lines that have to be on big pylons.
And the farmers won't have a bar of that going through their land.
Yeah,
so they're stuffed.
Yeah. Well, no, just because eventually, my brother owns a farm in New Zealand. Eventually, he agreed to have the pylon for $30,000 a year.
Oh, okay. Can you grow vines on it or something?
The cows can feed underneath it.
I guess.
So he's earning a profit that he wouldn't otherwise make.
Yes.
But that's a cost buried into every future power bill.
Yes.
For here to eternity.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And eventually the farmers will have to agree to put these up, or the government will take it compulsorily anyway and pay them a rental. So that rental then gets built into every power bill from...
Yeah, they're not. I don't think they're accountants, are they? They just don't know how to add up, and none of this does add up.
No, they're just driven by this absolute passion to cut carbon dioxide, and they don't think through.
No, ideology. But they can't be so dumb. I mean, this Chris Bowen fellow. I mean, how could he have this goal for 2030 and the bigger goal for 2050 when we are not allowed to burn the coal, which is a natural resource in this country.
Yeah.
But we can't have the benefit of it, cheap electricity. But the people in China and India can.
Well, of course, the Greens are trying to stop all of those exports, which would achieve absolutely nothing because the Chinese will then buy the coal from South
somewhere
America.
Else. Yes.
And it's dirtier coal than our coal. It's you can't win.
But at the moment... do they imagine that the Chinese and the Indians are buying the coal to, put it in the cupboard?
No.
They're going to use it.
Yeah, of course they are.
So using it is the problem.
Yeah.
Why don't we use it? I mean, it's our coal.
Ideology.
Ideology.
It's almost as bad as the Zionism and the Islamists. Fanatical, not thinking through all of the consequences, not prepared to listen to counter-arguments.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that difficult.
Well,
anyway, let's talk about some good things.
Talk to me.
You know, the rain for the golf club was absolutely superb.
Yes.
The golf course is going to be in absolutely beautiful condition and it's going to last us for a while, and it will have gone into ponds and lakes all around the place and help build our water supply.
The water supply will be good.
So, you know, that's in the weather's, you know, it might get very hot later, but it's great now. And, you know, the unemployment rate is at the lowest it's been for quite a long time. You know, and the inflation is falling.
Yes.
And of course, the interesting thing is that one of my other guys that I like to read, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman, said in America they've got the real problem at the moment that the policies have been very, very significant and successful in reducing the inflation, the rate of inflation over there. The rate of inflation down there is down to 3% almost, 3.1 or 3.2 or something. Yep. But he said the problem is the people on the street don't know it's coming down because they're still paying $1 more, X cents more for gas than they were 12 months ago. And the price of beef is still that little bit more expensive. They're not looking at the rate of inflation, they're looking at the price of this versus the price of what it was last time. So when the phone bill comes in, the phone bill this month was a little bit more than the phone bill last month. And the grocery basket is just that little bit more this month than it was the same time last year. So they're still seeing inflation. So that's Mr. Biden's trouble coming up for re-election, facing this horrible, horrible thought that Trump will be running again.
Leighton rang in from Tokyo, as he sometimes does, and he was saying that his insurance had gone up. No, it was Les, of course. No, it was Les. That his insurance inexplicably had gone up 27%.
There's nothing inexplicable about it at all, Jeremy.
But it is
nothing inexplicable.
But the risk the insurance company was taking with that insurance couldn't have gone up 27% in 12 months.
No, but the amount of money they had to pay out for floods and fires and everything else over the last couple of years means their reserves are severely depleted.
So that's spread amongst
of course, it's spread,
everybody.
Jeremy, that's insurance. I mean, the whole concept of insurance is that it spreads the risk across the whole population. That's why you have insurance.
Well, everybody then should have insurance, so it's spread a little bit more evenly.
Any homeowner that hasn't got insurance is an absolute idiot.
Yeah.
Any business owner that hasn't got insurance is an absolute idiot. But that's the whole concept of insurance. It spreads the risk across everybody. So when there's a bushfire or when there's a flood, then the costs have to go up. And in particular, when the insurance company looks at where the floods have been and says, well, you've been flooded twice in 2 years and you're rebuilding in the same place, of course the price has to go up, and the price has to go up immensely because you're being stupid.
Well, people live on floodplains and they don't sort of take the hint.
They don't take the hint that either if they're going to rebuild, it's got to be on pylons 10 feet high, or they should be building up on the side of the slope. And governments are just absolutely insane for letting them build there again.
Yes.
And the same, with the bushfires. I mean, I think back to 2009 after the Black Friday fires in Victoria. I went across to Marysville as a volunteer for a month and worked there. And there were two things that really hammered home to me. The town of Kinglake was wiped out for all but one house. And the owner of that house had paid in the previous year fines of $30,000 for illegal clearing of trees and bushes around his house. Right? The Green Councils had sued him $30,000 or fined him $30,000 for clearing illegally. His house was the only one that survived. Another guy that I met in Marysville had everything you could imagine in terms of self-insurance and protection. He had a pond out the back of his house with a diesel pump with sprinklers on the house, on his garage, on his gazebo, on his greenhouse, on his chook run. The fire came through, he started the pump and left. The chook house survived, the gazebo survived, the greenhouse survived, the house survived, the garage survived. 2 days later, the big branch up there came down through the house, set it alight and destroyed the whole house.
God.
He had, for 5 years, been going at the council to be allowed to remove one branch off the tree. One branch the council would not let him remove. It cost him his house.
A good lawyer might be able to help him with that.
Well, he said the lawyers said you can't sue the council, but he was going to go the individual councillors for negligence in that he had reports by an arborist that in the event of a fire that branch would be dangerous.
Yeah.
And he was going to sue each individual councillor for negligence in that they had been warned that that was likely to happen and they chose not to act. But I've never heard the outcome. I don't know what happened.
No, speaking of councils, though, there are two councils here in South Australia. There's the Playford Council and the one in the north, northern areas
who've
council.
stopped doing the Welcome to Country.
Welcome to Country, the traditional owners and all that stuff, and they've just stopped it. I totally agree with it as well. And seeing as it was something that was
Invented by Ernie Dingo in 1996 when he welcomed a party of visitors from overseas.
And he thought it was very funny, and he incorporated it into his stand-up.
Yeah. And suddenly it's not traditional at all. And, and you know, if you look back through the writings of the historians, nobody's been able to find any writings in, say, that the culture, the anthropologists who studied the early. In the early days, no mention of welcome to country in any of their writings.
But they do it. I mean, even last night at this dinner that the Commonwealth Bank put on, there was an official welcome to country. Yeah. And, you know, you think we should do an official welcome to the dining room table?
An official walkout.
Oh, you did. You welcomed me. That was an official welcome.
Yeah, well, I suppose so. I see on the table we now have flowers.
Yes, some agapanthus.
Some agapanthus, yeah.
And that are absolutely appropriate for the moment because they're the same colour as the jacarandas.
Aren't they beautiful?
The jacarandas are stunning at the moment and the agapanthus are exactly the same colour. So it goes... In fact, I drive down Cleland Avenue towards home, drive through the agapanthus, the jacarandas, and the building at the end of the street has a row of agapanthus at the front that are that same colour.
Pretty as a picture.
It's a really beautiful picture.
Do you love the garden?
Oh, my garden?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not really a great green thumb or a great lover of gardening. No, but you know we've got a lot of flowers and colour in the yard and some trees and shelter and a lemon tree that's been there for 40. Well, it was old when we bought the house 43 years ago.
Oh wow.
And it looks as if it should be dead, but it's still going. and it's really strange because we've got this one lemon tree that, you know, half its trunk's fallen off and it looks like it should just be dead and it's still going. I've planted 4 other citrus trees in the garden and I can't get them growing at all.
Is it true that if you have a problem with a citrus tree that isn't fruiting, that you get a stick and you hit it and you beat it up, and it immediately starts to bear fruit?
Well, that's a good old wives' tale that I'd never heard before.
Well, somebody told me that.
I've never heard that one.
I've never found, of all the little bits and pieces of information that I've acquired over the years, I've never found that one to be very useful.
I'll go home and beat up these little citrus trees that aren't growing and see if it makes any difference.
Well, look, it's wonderful to see you again.
Oh, it's very nice to be here, Jeremy.
I've missed our talks.
Oh, so have I. Yeah.
You know, when you came in, we hardly ever talked about books.
And there's all sorts of lots of other things to talk. You know, we could be mourning the death of Henry Kissinger this morning.
Well, that is true. 100 years and a statesman, an academic to begin with, and a statesman that did more to shape the 21st century than
a lot of people. Yeah. And the loss of Rosalind Carter.
Yes.
Jimmy told us that 94. Jimmy Carter's still alive, one of the nicest men to ever be president of the US.
Well, he's 99, I think.
Yeah. What a contrast between Jimmy and Rosalind Carter and Donald Trump, eh?
Yes.
I mean, how has America got there? How has America got there?
350 million people to choose from.
Yeah. They've only got Biden and Trump. I mean, it's just...
Tony hates Trump.
Tony! It's absolutely ridiculous that man who just lies and lies and lies and has publicly said that if he's elected, he's just going to ignore the Constitution and do all sorts of stuff. He's going to abolish the Justice Department and he's going to jail anybody who's prosecuted him and all of those sorts of things.
He's going to have to do a lot of pardoning, isn't he?
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
A fair few followers in jail.
Yeah, that's right.
So you don't think it's a witch hunt? You don't think they're out to get him? Maybe
he's broken the law. It's quite clear that he's broken. I mean, the Georgia case is going to be the one because that's the clearest cut one. There is a recording of the phone call where he rang the state attorney general and said, "Find me 11,400 and something, whatever the number was. It was 11,000 and something votes, because that's what I need to win Georgia." Now, if that isn't interference in an election, I don't know what is. You know, it's just absolute blatant interference in an election. There's just no question about it. So how he can't be successfully prosecuted on that, I just don't know.
What's your favourite book?
Oh, Oh, Jeremy, so hard to... Probably the one I'm reading at the moment.
Which is? Which is?
Well, whatever it is. Whatever
okay.
it is, whichever one I'm reading at the moment. I mean, of the long-term ones that I really love, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series would be up there. Joshua Slocum sailing alone around the world.
Oh, because you're a sailor too, aren't you? I forgot
Rudyard
that.
Kipling's Captain's Courageous will be right up there. As a teenager, I must have read that book 10 or 15 times.
Did you like Biggles?
I wasn't a great fan of Biggles. I'd read a bit of Biggles. I know I disappoint you in saying that because you've got a complete collection of every Biggles, I believe.
I do, with a couple of spares.
At one stage in my life when I was extremely stressed at work, I read every novel that Louis L'Amour wrote.
Louis L'Amour?
Louis L'Amour.
I don't know the name.
Oh, you don't know the name?
No?
16 movies.
16 movies?
Dozens of TV series.
Tell me one.
Coachhouse? John Wayne bought titles
Oh.
of 16 of his movies and turned them into westerns.
Westerns, oh, right.
He wrote westerns.
Westerns.
And they were all short, 150 pages maybe. And I could read one at night. It was my way of, when I got home at night when I was stressed and all the rest of it, I'd grab Louis L'Amour. I could read it in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it just switched off everything and I could just go to bed and sleep. Magic. So they're not now. I'm not reading them now. I don't have the need to. But at the time, they were favourites.
Yeah, westerns.
Yeah.
I love
it was
westerns.
purely for the relaxation. I agree to love them. But they're a formula. I mean, Jack Reacher in the Lee Child books.
Oh, I remember that. You liked that very much. I know we were talking about.
But they were the same formula as the westerns.
Yeah.
The white hat rides into town, sees that the black hats are committing all sorts of crimes and dastardly behaviour.
Good formula.
He falls in love with the best woman and cleans out the black hats and rides off into the future. Now, or into the distance. And Lee Child, when we had dinner with him, he said the formula started back in about the 14th century. I can't remember who the author was, but he said the formula's been around forever. And the westerns are written by it, and a lot of the crime novels are written about it, and a lot of the romances are written just on exactly the same formula.
Is it true that there are only 7 real stories in the world?
Well, some people argue that's the case, but no, when you start to get into the areas of sci-fi and fantasy, some of them get a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever read The Specialist?
Who was that?
Well, it was written by a fellow called Chick Sales.
No.
Do you know what it was about?
No.
It was about the intricacies and the importance of being able to design an outside toilet. The Specialist. That's all he did, and his great. It's a lifetime.
Well,
it's a funny book.
You can write books about anything.
It's a little tiny book, but it's so funny. His greatest achievement in his life was a 9-holer for the local school. And it's quite a science.
Oh yes.
Apparently, you've got to put the wood pile near the outside dunny. You've got to put that there because women sometimes don't want to be surprised, or they don't want to look like they're going to the toilet, so they're going to the wood basket.
Right. Hello, messages arriving. It looks like my time's up.
No.
I'm surprised I didn't hear peeps for the news.
What we did, they came through. I'm surprised they didn't go through your headphones.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear them.
Blotted them out.
I see. Okay.
You faded them out.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
What about The Prophet? I think The Prophet still
Yeah,
sells.
it still sells. Yeah.
Khalil Gibran. Yep.
I don't know for sure, but I did read once, and I can't. It's the sort of statement you can't verify. But somebody once made the assertion that part of this one quote out of The Prophet that is the most common reading at weddings.
What is it? You know?
I can't remember it now, the word, but it was an extract.
Something like run.
No. Your children are not your children; they are your arrows to the future, or something like that.
Oh, that's quaint. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
And very, very true and thought-provoking quote.
Well, look after yourself.
Thank you.
Let's do this again.
No, absolutely. I'll come whenever you ask me.
The wonderful.
Well, not every day, but I'll come.
No. I don't do this every day. The wonderful Bruce Mackie, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free And you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.